With the increasing growth of online learning across the world, it becomes imperative for us to take a critical look at the instructional design in an online learning environment. In this video, we will go over the key elements of instructional design with a view to equipping you with requisite knowledge and skills to develop an interactive and engaging course content to facilitate learning. Hi, I'm Lukuman Bello, and I'll walk you through the process of instructional design in an online learning course. This is quite important whether you have an existing course material or you want to develop a supplementary e-lesson notes to be used for your class. It is expected that at the end of this lesson, you will be able to design a meaningful, interactive, and engaging course content that improves learning outcomes of the learners who are physically separated from you. So, let us go on to examine the basic elements of instructional design in an online learning environment.
Now, for the purpose of this lesson, we are going to discuss the basic elements of instructional design, which include learners' characteristics, intended learning outcomes, chunking of the content, learning activities, interactivity, appropriate technology, evaluation, and application. When you take note of all these elements and follow them as you are coming up with your content, then you are simply involved in instructional design. It's as simple as that. Because instructional design is just the process of analyzing learning needs, setting intended learning outcomes, development of instructional materials, and development of a delivery system to engage learners in instructional content. So, as you work towards acquiring competencies in setting up your course on the learning management system, due consideration should be given to the systematic and logical arrangement of the instructional content to promote and support learning. Remember, unlike the face-to-face classroom instruction, you might not be with your students while they read the content. Therefore, these key elements of instructional design should be your guiding principles while designing your course content or you are preparing a supplementary e-lesson note. As a prelude to our online class, which comes up shortly, let us quickly go through these elements and what you need to do in each stage. Number 1, learners' characteristics. It is important that you understand your learners before you design content for them. As an efficient online tutor, analyzing learners' characteristics could be the first thing you need to do in designing your course content or doing online facilitation. The characteristics range from age, gender, socioeconomic status, ethnic nationalities, technological competence, educational level, and learning styles. Of course, online learners come from diverse backgrounds with different learning styles. For instance, adults are always curious about why they should learn something, and they also prefer to be self-directed. They need instructional content that will allow them cope with the ever-increasing challenges of the modern society. So, while designing instruction for this group, it's important to bear this fact in mind and give them problem-solving activities. On the other hand, children are always dependent on the method of explanation and the learning strategies employed. They are motivated by storytelling and the use of multimedia resources like illustration and animation. Another important element of instructional design is intended learning outcomes. Fundamentally, this is one of the key elements of instructional design, and it directs all other components of the content. Intended learning outcomes are the skills and knowledge that you expect your students to acquire after going through the content. These learning outcomes determine the instructional content and learning activities to be incorporated. In other words, the intended learning outcomes direct all other activities in the content, all other components of the content. Your course content is only meaningful when you are able to indicate specific knowledge and competencies your students need to acquire at the end of the instruction. Be sure that the intended learning outcomes are stated in measurable terms that will lead to the acquisition of knowledge and skills. An example of the intended learning outcomes could look like this. In the first instance, you will notice that these intended learning outcomes are stated in measurable terms. You will see words like discuss, differentiate, design. All these words are measurable terms. You can determine whether students have been able to perform all this or not. You don't use words that are not measurable like know or understand. Students should be able to know, or student will be able to understand, for instance. How do you measure that a student knows? you need to take note of the fact that when you are coming up with your intended learning outcomes, you need to use measurable terms. At this point, you need to ensure that the content and learning activities are geared towards achieving those intended learning outcomes. For instance, if you want your learners to learn how to download and install Moodle, then you might need to integrate an instructional video that explains the steps involved. This implies that having well-stated intended learning outcomes without the required content could defeat the purpose of an online learning. Therefore, as you are working on the existing course materials or you are developing the new content, ensure that you incorporate learning activities that will assist learners achieve the stated intended learning outcomes. This is quite important so that you're able to incorporate learning content that will meet the needs of your learners. Another element is chunking of the content. That's a very critical component of your course material as well. You are dealing with self-paced learners who will like to learn at their own pace. Thus, the content should be broken down into digestible format to make learning meaningful to the students. In essence, you don't have to choke your students with excess information at a time. Even during online facilitation, give your learners basic information about the concepts and allow them to interact and discuss. Chunking allows you to give them the basic information that will provoke critical thinking and deep learning. Learning activities. These activities might include learning strategies that will elicit responses from the students. It is expected that you incorporate specific learning activities in your online course. Scenarios, case studies, simulation, digital games, and digital storytelling are some of the most effective e-learning activities. Each has the capabilities to emphasize the real-world application of the e-learning course content. For example, scenarios, digital storytelling, and case study could be used to put learning in context. Practical-oriented tasks could be simulated to explain the steps involved in the process. Remember, there should be a relationship between these activities and the intended learning outcomes. What you put here is determined by the intended learning outcome that you set at the beginning of the course. Appropriate technology is another element of instructional design. Online learning relies largely on technology, and it becomes imperative for you as an online tutor to leverage the capabilities of multimedia learning resources in the instructional process. The 21st century learners live in media-saturated environments, and therefore they appreciate learning through multimedia resources. So these resources are an integral component of an e-learning course, and they have to be used appropriately. And you will discover here it's not even the technology that is the important thing here. Okay, it is the appropriateness of the technology. Interactivity is another component. This is a very critical element of instructional design. Interactivity is the process of engaging learners in instructional content through learning strategies and tools like scenarios, gamification, digital storytelling, videos, and other media resources. Scholars agree that interactivity improves learners' engagement and retention. But one important point we should note here is that all the media elements in the content should interact with one another. Make sure that videos, images, and illustrations are well integrated within the text. For instance, an image should not be a standalone component within the content. Rather, you need to make reference to it before or after the media. You might also need to ask questions that will compel students to watch a particular video in the content. Let me show you how you can do this when you are coming up with your course material. Now, assuming you are writing on something like this, maybe you are writing on water pollution. Now, look at this place now. You will see I've embedded two pictures here, picture A and picture B. Look at the statement here. This statement is making reference to the pictures above. Statements like this will improve interactivity in your content. The seventh instructional element we are going to discuss is evaluation. There is a need for evaluation of the content as students go through the chunks. This has become an important component of an online course. Some scholars advocate for summative evaluation at the end of the unit. However, personally, I prefer formative evaluation that focuses on the regular assessment of students before the end of the unit, because I believe this allows you to progressively monitor your students' learning. Self-assessment questions scenarios, case study, and digital storytelling could be used to evaluate students at interval. Now, application is the last element of instructional design we are going to discuss here, because the essence of education is to equip learners with knowledge and competencies to solve personal and societal problems. So online courses should be developed in such a way that it guides students to take an active role in understanding and applying new knowledge learned from the course. This is entrenched in constructivism learning theory, which encourages learners to take ownership of the learning process. Your learners should be able to think critically and apply what they learn to solve personal and societal problems. To achieve this, you need to ensure that you relate different concepts in the course content to your learners' environment. This puts learning in context. You will do better if you can integrate local material or local media into your instructional videos and learning resources. This allows learners to connect the concept with their environment. Apparently, learning becomes realistic and meaningful to the students when you are able to do this. So these are what I consider the key elements of instructional design. You have to take note of them and apply them as you are setting up your course on the Moodle platform. As we are working towards improving quality in the system, the process begins with a quality, engaging, and interactive course content.